The glowing structure at the bottom of a lonely northern lake is not of this earth. But Michael Hart can't stay away. His encounter will leave him utterly changed with astonishing abilities and a destiny he could never have imagined. From then on, the choices he makes will affect the very future of humanity, and he will decide whether he will become a hero or the greatest traitor the world has known. Because he is no longer alone. Not even in his own body. There is another. Naïda. A new thriller by Scott Overton. Well, good evening. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I am honored to have in the virtual studio with me tonight Scott Overton on the day of the book launch for his new sci-fi thriller, Naïda. Scott, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark. This is great. Yeah, big day. Always a big day when you can launch a new book. And thank you for that intro, too. That was fantastic.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. I'm so excited to talk about your latest novel. But before we get into Naïda, I want to talk a little bit about your background as a writer. You do define yourself as a science fiction writer. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I've written a couple of stories that would be considered fantasy, not high fantasy, but not science fiction. My first book, because I was a radio broadcaster for my whole career, my first book, Dead Air, was set in the radio world in Sudbury, Ontario, a fictionalized Sudbury where I live. But other than that, all science fiction.
Okay. And then Primus Labyrinth, you released, was it last summer that you released that, or was it prior to last summer?
No, I released that just at the beginning of March 2020. Can you imagine a worse time? I couldn't.
I was like, hey, I'm going to launch a new book. Uh-oh.
Couldn't by that time do a live launch. And just right then, the pandemic set in and hit everybody so hard. You know, buying a book at that time was just the last thing anybody wanted to think of. And probably writing a book was one of the last things people wanted to think of too. So it wasn't a great time, but it was my first written science fiction novel. I had written and published quite a few science fiction stories and fantasy stories from different places and different venues, but that was my first full-length novel. And I hope people will still find it. You know, without the big splashy launch, at least it's still there. It's all available. And I hope they'll like that one too.
Now, you ran a promo on that recently. Is it still discounted if people are looking for it, or is it back up to regular price?
You know, I have not raised the price yet. No.
So wait a minute. People can get Primus Labyrinth for 99 cents?
99 cents. 99 cents. Full length, science fiction thriller novel that people have compared to Michael Crichton, and reviewers have compared to Dan Brown. I think closer to Crichton. But, I'm not saying it's as good as Michael Crichton. I'm a big fan of his. But it is a science fiction-based thriller about a guy who's trying to save the life of a VIP whose bloodstream has been implanted with chemical bombs that can create fatal blood clots. And he's, by virtual reality, piloting a nano submarine, a nano-sized submersible the size of a virus. Supposedly no danger to him, of course.
Supposedly.
That's totally wrong, but yeah.
Awesome. So that's the sci-fi thriller. That's the Primus Labyrinth. But we are celebrating June 1st, 2021 as the official launch day for Naïda. Tell me about Naïda.
Well, Naïda still also has a basically thriller plot. I kind of tend to do that, but it's a science fiction story about a guy who's a scuba diver, and in one of Sudbury's many pothole kind of lakes, he finds something at the bottom that cannot be of this earth. He thinks it's an alien artifact that may have been abandoned before the last ice age 10,000 years ago. but it turns out not to be as abandoned as he thinks. And he ends up getting a hitchhiker, essentially. An alien being enters his body. And from then on, well, there's a whole other story.
So, where did the inspiration for Naïda come from?
I think primarily, as an author, Mark, that ideas can come from anywhere. Primarily the fact that I'm a scuba diver and I've never found anything that was really alien under there, but almost everything looks kind of alien. It's like another world under the surface, wherever you are, whether it's the ocean or a Northern Ontario lake. Fascinating stuff. I love it. And that was probably the inspiration. What if you found something really cool? And there was also the little bit about kind of, if you remember the movie 2001 from Arthur C. Clarke, the monolith is on the moon so that it doesn't send a signal until humankind is able to get there. And there's a little bit of that in Naïda, that this artifact is definitely deliberately hidden at the bottom of a lake. So it wouldn't be found until humans could reach it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Naïda, I heard in another interview that you had done that the name of the book came after you fell in love with the character, or the character started to grow on you. How did that happen?
Well, I had come up with all kinds of different names, none of which I liked. Naming a book most of the time is like naming a kid. It's really hard to do. And you try to find something in the book that's a natural title for it. And you very often can't discover what that is until the book is completely written. And in this case, I still couldn't. But I hire an editor that I work with named Robin Carson, great guy. And I asked him, I said, this isn't part of your job, but is there anything in the book that struck you that would be a good title? And he got back to me and he said, why don't you call it Naïda? That is the name that Michael, the human character, gives to the alien being in the book. And I suddenly realized, this being is central to the book. It's as much their book as it is the human's book. And it made perfect sense. Now, Naïda is a word that comes from mythology, the name of a water nymph in mythology. So being that the being is discovered in a lake, and that the abilities that it passes on to Michael especially involve underwater, it was a perfect kind of fit for it. I don't know why I didn't think of it in the first place.
Excellent. So he gains additional powers. Would that make this equivalent to maybe almost like a superhero kind of novel?
I've said that that is similar to a superhero origin story in that sense. Something happens. He's not bitten by a radioactive spider. But although there are comparisons to Spider-Man Venom, if anybody knows that kind of storyline. But
oh yeah, the alien symbiote.
The alien symbiote. So there's that kind of thing. And of course, his abilities, once you have those super special, extraordinary, and exceptional abilities, what's your responsibility to do with those things? You're a Spider-Man fan. What is the responsibility? Great power comes great responsibility, right? So there's some of that certainly in it. That's a big part of the book.
And there's the tagline of not being alone. This is a time in human history where we're required, except for the people we live with in many parts of the world, that we're alone. So, are there any parallels between what's happening in the world today and the premise of this? Because he's no longer alone.
He's no longer alone, not even in his own body, as the tagline goes. He's actually sharing his body with another personality, not just another organism. We share our bodies with millions and millions of microorganisms that aren't human cells. We don't even notice it. We need them. But this is an organism that has a being. It is a personality. What would that be like? Whole different ball game. I mean, we can think of the most intimate human relationship, and it doesn't compare to that. So I thought there were an awful lot of dramatic possibilities with that.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. It's like when you're stuck in a location with the same person for a long, long time, isolated, that is still different because you can
Sure.
still move apart. You're not
Go to
hearing
another
other
floor.
people's thoughts.
Go to another floor of the house or something. Yeah, I know. No, this is a different, and aliens, two totally different species, no form of connection before that point.
Wow.
So there was huge potential for story in that.
And let's talk a little bit about science fiction. So a lot of people, when they think about science fiction, they're thinking about Star Trek, or they're thinking about interstellar travel, and Arthur C. Clarke and stuff like that. This is more near real time science fiction. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This certainly could be present day. And a lot of my books that I've written are either present day or very near future. I don't tend to look hundreds or even 1,000 years in the future. But this book is present day, and it just happens to be that this alien presence is the agency that makes the plot move ahead. But as far as science fiction goes, I'm a big Star Trek fan, but it's not all space travel. It's not all time travel. And it's a very thoughtful literature. I saw a clip where Robert J. Sawyer, Canada's premier science fiction writer, gave his definition of science fiction, especially versus fantasy, because some people don't distinguish between the two. And I wish I remembered his exact wording, but the key point of it was that it's a literature of the plausible. Science fiction has to be plausible based on what we know or what we think can happen. So that's really what it is. This book doesn't have a lot of high technology. It doesn't really have space travel or anything like that. It does have aliens, but it is a plausible story, I believe.
Is science fiction, in your opinion, is science fiction, I've heard the phrase used saying that it's a mirror held up to reality. Maybe it's a way to look at ourselves in a different way because we can kind of step back. How do you view that?
So much of science fiction, really good science fiction, is metaphor. And you can go back to War of the Worlds being about, colonialism or whatever you want. One example that people use is Planet of the Apes, the movie, and then the other subsequent movies being about racism. But apart from that, it's also about the broader us versus them on any kind of scale that humans have. So there is that metaphor. Yes, it's about an astronaut who goes to a planet and the apes rule there. But it's a metaphor for our society and the racism and the separation that we force upon ourselves in so many ways, seeing us and other in a lot of different ways. So there's, in many science fiction stories, a plot line. It's a story about this, but it's also about something in our own society that we need to think about. Now, in this case, with Naïda, although it isn't based on a lot of technology, I wanted to explore the question of humanity and how we define humanity. And that is sort of, how much can we change and still be considered human by ourselves, by others? Because that will be a question in our society as we get into more genetic engineering, we get into more merging of technology with biology. It's going to be a question that we'll have to make some hard decisions about.
Wow, I can't wait to dig in. I ordered my copy in ebook, and speaking of which, so it is available in ebook and in print format. Is that correct?
It is, for sure. And now I had some technical difficulties with Amazon, so I'm just getting the print book version available within the next couple of days from Amazon. The ebook has been available, and the ebook's available through all kinds of retailers. As you've got on the screen, Books to Read is a universal book link that'll take you, and you can choose Kobo or Apple or Google Play or Amazon or wherever you want to go, Barnes and Noble, and buy the ebook. The print book is also going to be available, ordered through bookstores. And although I didn't find it at Chapters Indigo yet, today is the launch day, and I'm hoping that it will show up sometime soon. And for those in the Sudbury area, I'm going to be selling print copies at the Sudbury Farmers Market on the weekend on this coming Saturday, the 5th.
Oh, excellent. So people can actually get a signed copy in person this weekend?
Autographed copy, 9 to 2, Sudbury Farmers Market, corner of Paris and York Street.
However, the really, really smart people who are watching this live may have a chance to win a signed copy, as well as some extra copies that you have. What do you have that as people could potentially win just by leaving a comment over here? Like, let us know if you're interested. You'll be put in a random draw before the end of this broadcast. We will let you know if you won.
Yeah, you don't have to ask a question or anything. Just say, yeah, I'd like one. Yes, please. Count me in, whatever. So as long as we have a comment, so we have your name and we can put you in the draw, and you could win an autographed print copy of it. I'll mail that out, or we'll be giving away a few e-book copies of it. And whether you need EPUB or Kindle or PDF, we can send that out. I can email that out to you. We'll explain more about that once we do the draw.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is, Scott, you're going to entertain us with a bit of a reading. I'm going to go pay attention to some of the comments. I'm going to make some notes because I have to use random.org. We're in a random number generator to figure out who the winner is going to be. So you're going to treat us to a bit of a reading from Naïda?
Sure, I'd be glad to do that.
Excellent.
And I can set that up, I guess, being that I'm like, want to read, as when I read to my grandchildren all summer long, I'll put on my reading glasses. Now, we set up the story for you. Michael Hart, the scuba diver, discovers this artifact in the opening of the book, and it's clearly alien. Now, as a scuba diver, you should never dive without a buddy, but his buddy is totally freaked out by this, doesn't even want to acknowledge it. Michael cannot stay away, so Michael has to go back. He knows he's seen something alien at the bottom of this lake, and he breaks all of the rules that he swore by as a scuba diver and goes back by himself. And that's where we come in. The water of the lake seemed darker and lonelier this time. Michael pulled himself down through the murk, self-consciously glancing over his shoulder in a trained reflex, looking for a buddy who wasn't there. He had a strong feeling that he was on a fool's errand, that his imagination had got the better of him, and there was nothing to be found. But it was there. It was all there. His brain struggled for comprehension while his body shivered with a mix of fear and wonder. The water filled with radiance that illuminated the silty lake bottom over an area about the size of a small suburban lot. Strange structures stood in irregular rows, a garden of vast elephant ear plants, or an office worker's cubicle farm, except in barely perceptible motion. He couldn't find the right analog without knowing whether the things were alive or constructed. What he saw seemed to be a single complex structure built of living materials. Flattened panel-like objects extended upward like asymmetrical walls about the height of a man, but not connected unless at their bases. Thin, pliant, and nearly transparent, it all gave off light. Everything he saw was a source of light, and the flat surfaces were dappled with patterns of some kind. With his mind shifting from Sunday school depictions of heaven to lurid special effects sequences in sci-fi movies, he fought both the urge to flee and a compelling call to approach. Afraid or not, he wasn't going to learn any more without getting closer. Like a spider dropping from its web, he lowered himself into the middle of the glow, keeping clear of the walls. Or maybe not walls. They spread themselves apart, welcoming. Unless he wasn't the spider, but the fly. The gelid panels that surrounded him slowly changed dimension, as if in response to a non-existent wave surge. Oblong pouches draped over the upper edges of some of the panels like Salvador Dali clocks. The panels were extravagantly radiant, brightening as he came among them. He was sure of it. He'd been right about patterns on the panels, too. Not shadows or reflections, but Rorschach blotches, ovoids, rounded tetrahedrons that paraded each at its own pace from edge to edge. Short, jagged lines as well, some separate, some in arranged clusters like oversized kanji characters, or the symbol-strewn scribblings of mathematicians' nightmares. His imagination endowed the patterns with meaning, but meaning inaccessible to his conscious understanding. His gloved finger was drawn toward the nearest panel, half expecting the surface to produce a flurry of shooting sparks at his touch. The image of spider and fly appeared in his mind again. Why? He glanced down. A scream erupted from his throat with an explosion of bubbles. Half his body was covered by clear jelly that spread upward from his waist like an oil slick. He kicked in a panic reflex, but his feet were already encased. The walls had drawn back out of reach of his flailing arms. He tried to push at the jelly, keep it from his head, but it was too thin and too slick. It reached his neck, his chin. His fumbling attempt to hold his mask against his face had the opposite effect, breaking its seal against his skin and letting the invader in. Another primal scream rattled his regulator before it too was thrust aside. Slime covered his nose and then his eyes. He clamped his lips shut, knowing it was futile. He would either drown or the stuff would suffocate him. In his last few moments of clarity, he opened his eyes and was startled to see every detail of his surroundings. The petal-like panels with their ink blot symbols in shades of color, no longer black. Stunted weeds struggling upward from the sludgy lake bottom, microscopic specks of plant and animal life suspended in the water. He'd thought the visibility was only about 6 meters, but now it seemed closer to 20. He'd never seen so well or so far in a freshwater lake. Then came surrender and regret. Bubbles burst from his mouth and nostrils, and he sucked greedily for air, even as he knew he would find liquid death instead. His lungs filled with water, ice cold. Emptied. Filled, inexplicably, a second time. And a third. And I think I'll stop there.
Wow. I can't wait to dig into this novel. So thank you for treating us with that, Scott. So while you were doing that, I took note of the comments and the people. I numbered everyone, and I did a random draw, and I'm going to announce the winner of the signed paperback copy. And the signed paperback copy, according to the number I pulled, is Connie. Congratulations. Connie, popping up a comment from Connie, says, was waiting for the reading. So congratulations, Connie. What you can do is you can email Scott over at scottoverton.ca. Let him know. So Connie, I won the paperback, and then you can ask how you want it signed and where to be shipped to, etc. I did. I have to comment. Sue Guy says, I'd love a copy, but Scott would also love to buy one at the farmer's market. But the good news is Sue Guy and Danny and Matt are all lucky winners of the ebook as well. So Scott can send you the digital copy. Again, you guys can email him over at scott@scottoverton.ca. All that random drawing that I was doing. So, yeah. Scott, the reading that you just did, really well done. Was it your background in radio that just made you so comfortable in doing something like that?
Well, I'm sure there's that. I was trained as an actor in my university days. That's what I did, and that's kind of what my university degree is specializing in. And so I did a lot of that in those days, and then got into radio almost by accident. But then, as you know, I was a radio host for about 30 years. So I'm not really bothered by performing in front of public. It's not life or death. And I enjoy reading out loud and performing in that way. Certainly something of my own, which is great. I love to pass along a story like that. You end it there, and I kind of felt like the grandfather in The Princess Bride saying, he doesn't die here. You know, he doesn't. You're looking concerned, but he doesn't die.
But I forgot to ask, is this a kissing book?
That's right. They're kissing. There is actually, some adult content, actually, but it's not terribly graphic or anything like that. So just if you see something that says, "Oh, it has adult content," yeah, it's not really bad. I wouldn't recommend it for kids, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm going to pop up some comments, people that were leaving some gracious comments. So Matthew Del Papa, local author from the Sudbury region, said, read the ebook and loved it. So he obviously got it today and read it and loved it. It'd be cool to have an autographed copy on my shelf. Sorry you didn't win. I guess you won the ebook, but you already have the ebook, maybe Scott will figure out something else that he can send you ebook wise.
I'll have to. Yeah, he's got the ebook, I'm sure, for that. He pre-ordered, and I made a great review too. But I will make sure. I'll have to make sure Matt gets a copy, a print copy, autographed copy, Matt.
Autographed copy. There you go. Nice, cool. Sugai obviously said, "Wow." Obviously, thank you to probably for winning the ebook. You've got thanks from Matt as well. And then the other thing too is that he also said 99 cents. Sign me up, which is probably in response to Primus Labyrinth.
Yeah,
well.
still available. I'm going to change the price on that tomorrow. We're doing this on June 1st. I know this is going to stay up for a while, so
yeah,
it'll be changed after then, and it'll go back to its regular price,
which is still a deal, right? It's probably only $5 anyway.
$5.99, which you buy a coffee and muffin for a couple of people or something. That's a whole book. Yeah.
Great. And that's $5.99 Canadian. You're talking about. It's probably $4.99 American or something like that, right?
Well, they do have different prices, here and there at Amazon and such. Yeah.
Cool. So, Scott, thanks for doing this tonight. What are you working on next? Because I know, like, you had Primus Labyrinth came out in 2020. You've got this book that's coming out 2021. Are you working on other books? What's in the pipeline?
I have written 9 science fiction novel manuscripts.
Whoa.
I've published now 2. And so those ones I'm going to work on, and maybe every 6 months or so I'm going to get them out there. The thing is, I have to have them edited. I don't want to put anything out there that hasn't been professionally edited. That's a promise to myself. That takes some time and some money. So we'll do that. But I'm still writing. So yeah, I'm outlining another book at the moment, and it will be a rarity among my books, set in space, set on a spacecraft. I never do that.
Wow.
I'm going to be doing that. So yeah, it'll be a little bit different. The next one that you will see come out, hopefully in the fall, and I know you've got a book coming out in the fall too. So we'll coordinate that so they don't conflict.
Yeah, maybe we can do a double, a joint effort on something like that.
Yeah. So the next one is an interesting one where a woman runs into an old boyfriend of hers and thinks he's become possessed by multiple personalities. And as the tagline goes, she's only half right. The personalities are real and they're from the future.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right. I'm intrigued. Why'd you do this to me?
I'm sorry. We were talking about it. You said, what's next? That's what's next.
Awesome. So people can check you out over at scottoverton.ca. There's blog, links to your books, all kinds of things there.
Yep. There's some free reading, some stories that they can read. There's a Dead Air podcast version of my first novel.
Wait, they can listen to Dead Air? They can listen to the podcast of that?
Yep. There should be a link there. I know that's one of my popular things when it comes to RSS subscribers. That's popular. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And that was such a great thriller too.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I love doing it. And people in Sudbury area particularly enjoyed it because it's set right there. Now, Naïda, there is a good part of it that's set in Sudbury. There are places like Science North and the Ramsey Lake Boardwalk and the Lily Creek Boardwalk and a few other places that they'll recognize.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, a comment I'm just reading from Connie said, Space Story going to IGY Airport. IGY, I'm not sure. I don't know that code.
Wait. I don't either.
What is the code for Sudbury? I know YYZ is Toronto, and I know all kinds of LGA for LaGuardia in New York, but I've only flown into Sudbury a couple times actually. So
it probably means something else, and Connie will tell us after. I don't know.
It's probably some sort of short. Well, Scott, thank you so much for entertaining us today, for answering my questions and doing the giveaway tonight.
Well, thank you for hosting me. I mean, this wouldn't be a launch day without this kind of virtual event, and I owe that thanks to you. So, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, you're a generous and kind friend and man, and all the best with your writing too.
Oh, thank you. The least I can do after all the times you've had me on your radio program over the years. So
glad to do it. Always glad to do it.
Awesome. Scott, thank you so much. And thank you, kind listeners, for your participation and for watching live. Everyone, have a fantastic night.